Hello, good evening, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. Hope you all had a good day today. For those that are in the US, and it's still Tuesday, and for those overseas, hope you are having a good start to your day. All right, let's get this started. Hi, everyone. My name is Tashina. I am an executive leadership and team coach, and I help teams and the leaders who lead them collaborate better, heal from conflict, and get shit done without all the drama. So, today, what I want to talk about is storytelling. Storytelling is one of those skills that people claim is a soft skill, but it's really not a soft skill. Like, this is a skill that is really beneficial to all of us. And I want to talk about storytelling not necessarily as a communication skill, but as a way to improve and elevate your system, meaning your work system, your organizational system, so that you are more effective as a leader, and you are more effective for your team as well. Let me just fix this so that I can see both Instagram and um, LinkedIn. I am also on YouTube. So for those that are on YouTube, hello, hello. All right, share this live. Today is all about storytelling. Share this live, storytelling in your workplace, in your organization. This is what this live is about today. All right. So every team, every organization already has stories that shape how people work together, whether they realize it or not. The stories are out there. We hear them. Even if we aren't in the organization, we know the stories already. But the real question is, do you actually know the stories of your organization? Do you know the stories that make success, that the stories of success in your organization? Do you know your founder's story? Do you know the story of your mission? Like, what got your mission going? Or do you know the story that activates people, like that moment where a movement started, that can bring people together, that can help them connect and show up and just really care about each other? Do you know those stories? Because if you don't know those stories, your system is probably running on a default narrative, things that people are making up, things that people are saying that probably may or may not be true. It's the allegedly. And so that's if you don't know those stories. And so you really want to make sure that you're not running on those default narratives, because you want to make sure that your stories match where your company is headed. And when that happens, where you don't know, the teams have a harder time staying connected, and they have a harder time staying aligned. And then your culture starts to shift and people are disconnected. And there isn't a shared kind of movement, a shared approach to different things. The alignment doesn't come together like it should. And so, what I want you to know as we talk today, storytelling isn't something that is only for leaders to do. It isn't just something leaders do. Leaders meaning small L leaders. So I'm going to start saying capital L leaders and small L leaders. Capital L leader is the leader with the formal title. Small L leader is the leader that is part of the system but still leading from your seat. We are all leaders. Okay. So I just made that up on the fly. Capital big L, small L. Okay. So storytelling isn't just for the big L leaders, it's also for the lowercase L leaders as well. And it's something that the entire system will benefit from, because they actually help shape the culture, and it helps people move people and processes forward. Your system, again, is already telling a story. It's already stories out there. You can see it in the way people communicate, how you make decisions, and how you even celebrate success across the organization. But you need to find out if those stories are intentional, if they are aligned with where you're going, and do they actually motivate people? Do they get people energized? Or are they outdated? Are they accidental? Has there been like a shift in your organization? Or is there something that's holding the team back? Like, are your stories something that's like, ooh, I do not like being connected to that story? I remember working with somebody who was working for an organization that she didn't align to the stories of that organization. And it actually didn't motivate her to go to that work, to that job every day. And so those are the things you need to ask. So today is day 17 of 30 days of systems that make teams work. And today I'm going to unpack why storytelling is the foundation of trust, connection, and alignment, how stories shape the systems that you're in, whether good or bad, they shape it. And then how to lead through story so that your system and your people move in the same direction, because that's what it's all about. We are better together, strength in numbers, as I would say, or as the warriors would say. Okay. So share this live. We're getting into it. So share the live, share the live. All right. So every effective system needs two things. Okay. There's two things every system, every organization needs. Sorry, y'all. The fire truck is going by my window. San Francisco for you. But every effective system needs two things. They need a structure, a way of things that are the way we do things, and it needs meaning, like the why we do things the way we do. In the live that I had that talked about the rhythm of work, where I talked about rituals will give the system meaning, and they make the work tangible and help people live the values. But storytelling is the other half of that. Okay, I'll say that again. Rituals give systems meaning by making the work tangible, and it helps people live out the values. When you have rituals, when you have those normal things that you're doing all the time to come together to align, those rituals, right? To bring your people together. Storytelling is the other half of that. So rituals will keep things steady and going forward. Storytelling brings it alive. It brings the meaning into it. Stories tell people why the system exists. Why do we exist? Who do we serve? How do I belong as a part of that story? Those are the things that we get when we have good stories. And that's what turns like your strategy. So if you're a strategy person and you're looking at strategy, that's what turns strategy into something that people can actually embody, they actually feel connected to. Okay. So your story will turn your strategy into something people actually embody, actually appreciate. Okay. So we want to really look at story as a way to kind of like amplify the strategy or help the strategy really get executed the way they should. Now, the problem with our organizations is that, y'all, we spend way too much time crafting mission statements, or we'll craft the vision slide, and when I tell you the wordsmithing that happens on a mission statement, y'all, Lord, we could spend all day trying to wordsmith and make sure every word is perfect and it feels a certain way. And like we go down that rabbit hole. But people forget statements. If can anybody tell me what your organization mission statement is right now? Put it in the chat. For anybody that is either watching this again or if you're live, put in the chat. Do you know your team's mission statement? Do you know your organization's mission statement without looking it up? Don't Google it. Don't go to your company website. Does anybody know? I bet you have to think about it if you know it, or I bet you don't even know it, right? It's because people don't remember all those statements. They remember stories. They remember the stories that come from it, because a story will move people in a very different way than this just like generic statement, because in story I can see myself in a story. That's why we love movies. Like, this society is a movie going generation, or like society. Like, we like to go to movies because we like the stories. The last movie that I went to was to go see Him. Y'all, the critics didn't give that movie a lot of hype and a lot of like gold stars, but I love that movie. Why? Because I could totally sitting from the outside as a sports mom, I can totally see how the industry of athletics can totally make you feel like you have to basically sacrifice everything to become an elite player, to become, an NFL player, an NBA player, a hockey league player, like all of these things. And so the movie Him stuck it, like it stayed with me. It still stays with me today. And that's because the stories that we have actually move people in the direction that we want them to go. Literally, that movie was so good that after the movie, me and Marquez, my husband, we actually talked to the boys about sports, and we talked about those type of things. And even to this day, like, we go to sports and we go like, because we want our kids to win, and we want them to have that grit that you need for sports. And we're like, I am him. Like, you better be him. You better be him. Like, because that's what it's all about. Because the stories move us. Okay. Stories will tell us where we're going, and it tells us what to believe in. It tells us how to move together. But without a story, things become like mechanical, robotic. It doesn't feel connected at all, right? You want to bring in the human and the humanity into your organizations. Come with the stories, share the stories. If you want to get a good review, if you want to get a good bonus, if you want to like really be able to say, this is what I did, tell it as a story. If you are in an interview and you are like, I am trying to make sure that I ace this interview, tell a story. Y'all, you don't know how powerful a story is until you tell a story. Like, stories are just so good because people remember the stories, they connect to them, and they see themselves in it. One of the places where stories could really be beneficial is in the onboarding processes. Typically, when we have an onboarding process, it's a checklist, it's a whole bunch of things to do. I've seen it on both sides, right? I've seen the like, okay, let me just get you through. Let me get you your new laptop. Let me get you a badge. Let me get you da 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 da, right? And I've also seen onboarding processes on the opposite side as well. When you just have a checklist, it sends the message to them like, we about to get to work. We don't have time for connection. We're just going to get you set up so you can get going, right? But the organizations that understand how great stories are, they build the story and they talk about it in the onboarding process because they know it brings a sense of belonging. It sends the message that you are a part of something big here. You're a part of something in this organization that is going to be beneficial. The two organizations that I've stayed with the longest, for those people who know me, hey, the Gap and Genentech, both G's, the Gap and Genentech. And both of these organizations have powerful founder stories. And they moved and they made me understand. Even to this day, I still resonate with those stories. At the Gap, it was the Don and Doris Fisher story. Two San Franciscans who built something iconic from the ground up, right? I know that story. I could see, as I'm thinking about it, I could see the picture of the first Gap store in San Francisco. And as somebody who is a San Francisco native myself, who has been born and raised here, that connects me, right? Then with Genentech, that story was about how two people met in a bar and created the first biotech company in the Bay Area. Like, they own a piece of like scratch paper, right? I'm always going to be connected to that story because I could see myself coming together with someone and sitting and being like, oh, we got something great right here. And it's building something so massive and so impactful, right? Those stories connected me to something bigger than just that job. They made me care about the work and the people that were behind the work. And that's exactly what storytelling does. It builds our emotional equity in the system. It builds that, and it turns your process into a purpose. It creates the belonging that you want, and it turns just regular typical information into something that's more inspiring and brings people together. So I've talked a lot about already why stories matter, right? But I want to go into just a little bit more of the psychology behind stories and why they matter so much. So we're, as humans, we are wired for story. It's how we've always made sense of things that were uncertain. How do we deal with change? How do we connect with one another? Stories are so good for change management. So if you are a change management or you're doing a major change, a transformation or something like that, and you're looking for a change manager that can bring story, holla at your girl, okay? Because creating the stories is so important. It really, really does help. Okay. It really helps to bring in just it provides less resistance with the change management. But when we used to bring story, we had data or dashboards, right? Um, that's the typical way that we kind of process things that are happening in our organizations now. You have, here goes all the data, here go the dashboards, now you see it, right? But before that, stories were passed along verbally. It wasn't a lot of data and dashboards. And those were the stories that we had. It told us where we came from, it told us who we could trust, how to survive in different situations. That's what story did for us. And they connected people long before we had these like formal systems in our organization. If you just think back to some of the stories that we grew up with, okay? Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Who's going to forget that? Or Cinderella. Everybody knows Cinderella. Or Dr. Seuss, right? Green eggs and ham, Sam I am. Like, I'm going to remember that, right? And it's not just because I'm a mom, but I know that story. Or Snow White, right? These stories aren't just fairy tales. They aren't just like for fun. They were the early systems that we had for making sense of like what's right, what's wrong, what's fair, what's courage, how do we belong? Like it gave us all these messages through story. Y'all following me? Share this live. Share it, share it, share it. If you are listening, share this live. I think this is important information. If you know somebody who wants to bring more story, more human into their organization or team, this will be beneficial for them. So, these stories also gave us patterns, and our brain loves a pattern, especially the ones that make life feel a little bit more predictable because we are creatures of predictability. We like stability. We don't like a lot of change. And so, if we could figure out the pattern, it makes us feel safe. Research actually backs this up, where neuroscientists say the human brain is 22 times more likely to remember facts if they are part of a story. So if you want to share some facts, um, use the story to share the facts. Or when we hear a story, our brain releases oxytocin. And this is the chemical that helps us trust and empathize with other people. So if you are trying to get people on your side, tell a story, get them into it, right? We see this with politicians all the time. It may be more bite-sized stories, but they're stories that they literally set us into, and we're like, oh, that's me. Oh my God. I have to, oh my God. Like we get there, or it builds our emotion, our oxytocin levels, our, we get that emotional kind of thing that happens for us when we hear stories. They don't just entertain us. It's not just for entertainment. It brings us together. Stories also can create fear, right? And so I'm not saying that this is something that I want you to do with stories. But some people use stories as fear and use the fear stories as a tactic to move people. The only thing with that is it's not going to be sustainable. Fear doesn't sustain us in the long term. So actually, we need the stories that actually have the happily ever after. We do need those type of stories. At the core, story can meet three deep human needs. They say, I belong here. So they bring connection. Stories remind us that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And they say, you're not alone. That's what it connects us. The second thing, it helps us have clarity where we understand what we're doing and why. So Simon Sinek, I've talked about him a couple of times. He says, start with why. Start with why, but use a story to communicate it, because those things help simplify. Stories can simplify complexity. And when we talk about why, you want to simplify how complex it can be. And they help people see the purpose in the process, especially during change. Again, during change management, this will help you tremendously if you use story. It also helps us to trust where we're going next. Stories can help people move through uncertainty with more confidence because of the stability and the predictability that stories bring. And they create consistency when everything else is shifting. Okay. When those needs are met, people trust the system. And when they're not, people start creating their own little stories. And they're like, oh, this is what I think it is. And that's when you start getting the misalignment. You get people that's a lot confused, and fear starts to spread. Okay. So that's why storytelling is not just about communication, y'all. It is about a systems practice that tells us that, our system needs to be built to have stories. And you can share stories within rituals. You could share stories within different systems, processes like decision making stories or feedback stories, or even in giving feedback, share the story. That is how leaders connect. That's how we bring the human side into our structures that we have. And when leaders start with humanity, the team's deepest fears, hopes, and needs, they can design stories and rituals that mean something. Okay. So if you start with the humanity, the fear, the hope, the need, then you you poke at the places that you need to poke in your people, and then you can start designing the stories the way you want. The stories that mean something. You can choose the stories that you really want to tell. Okay. And that's when storytelling stops being a leadership skill and becomes a design principle. So, typically, when I create my meeting agendas, what I say is there's a design principle. Like, this is where we're going to be focused. The design of this piece of the agenda is this. And so, maybe in your design, there's something about storytelling in your agenda. There is moments for storytelling that becomes a ritual. You see how this is all connected? That's how we connect with systems, because story is how people make meaning, and meaning is what keeps the system going. It keeps the system going forward. Okay. So, how does story shape the system? Every system tells a story, whether you intend to or not. I said this before. The question isn't if your system tells a story, it's which story is it telling, and whether it's the one that builds the trust that you want and the alignment that you want. They don't just describe your system, they drive it. So if you're wondering, like, okay, I build my system and my system has like certain things that I'm going to do, right? I'm going to have these different rituals, but now you need to execute. It needs to go, right? This is use stories to drive it. Use stories to drive it forward, because they're going to be able to influence how people make decisions and how they handle any kind of change. And then it will also help them interpret what's happening around them through the stories. But the places where leaders miss is that It's not just the stories you tell that shapes the system. It's also the stories that you allow to circulate. So those rumors, those like things that are not true, when you aren't being transparent in your system and then people are silent, they're confused, or they start making shit up, like those stories circulate too. And those stories shape the system because when the leaders don't tell the story, the system is going to fill in the blanks. Because by nature, we want to feel safe. We want to feel like, there's nothing that is coming after us. We don't have a bear that's running after us that we defend ourselves from. And so we want to make sure that we're doing this in the right way. We want to share the stories. We want to be transparent. Okay. People are always going to write their own version of a story. It's either going to be a fear-based story or a self-protection story when they don't have all the information. So if you want your system to work, you have to become intentional about the stories that are being shared and that's shaping the system. So here's how a story really shapes a system. The first thing is that the story creates alignment. So shared stories build a shared understanding. When everyone knows the why behind the work, they stop competing for direction and they start collaborating together. The second thing is that stories create resilience. So if there is a moment, there's a lot of layoffs happening and there's a lot of things that are going on in our society across different industries, and layoffs is one of those things. And when your organization can anchor to the story, you better believe your organization is going to be resilient at the end and it's not going to just crash and fall. Like we'll still have the stories to guide us and to bring us back after we've suffered for so long. Okay. Because when you go through change, you want to find the other change stories that can say, like, we've been here, we've done this, and we can do it again. Okay. And then the third thing is story creates a legacy. So whenever your system fades, it's because we have disconnected ourselves from the meaning of why we started in the first place. Stories will bring the meaning forward, front and center, and they help us remember why we do what we do, who we're here to serve, and what we're all about. It's how we sustain our culture across time. It's how we stay connected. And if your organization is feeling disconnected, I want you to ask yourself, what is the story that's being told right now? And what story needs to be told instead? Okay. What story is being told right now? And what story needs to be told instead? Are you the organization are you the layoff story? Is that the story you want everybody to tell? They will tell that if no other stories are being told, because that's what people will remember. Okay. Is it the we were on the news story? we had some like thing that happened? Is it like the CEO having an affair story? Like, what is the story that you want your organization to know and to follow and to be connected to? Those are the stories we need to stay. So if stories shape systems, then leaders are the system's chief storytellers. Not because you have the loudest voice or the title, but because your words and your actions set the tone for what is safe and what is valued and what's possible. You have to remember that. No matter what, you as the leader, set the tone. So the stories that you tell as a leader can create the emotional equity, and it can create the feel and the vibe of the system, especially when things are changing fast. And this is why, like, if you're thinking like as a leader and you're dealing with a lot of change and you want to stay grounded and you don't want to like a lot of leaders start burning out during change and they feel overwhelmed and they lose their foundation. It's because they've disconnected from the stories of the organization. Connect back to story. That's going to help you. And these are the 3 stories that every leader should tell. Okay. The first story is why we exist. Remember why you exist. What is the founder story? What is the origin story? When there are a lot of layoffs, and I know this from even when I worked at the Gap, is when there were a lot of layoffs, the thing that kept that organization going when there was so much like competition from online retailers and things like that is that Don and Doris Fisher story. It is like, just honestly, like, had it not been that, like, this couple who came together and homegrown in San Francisco and we're still here, that story connects, okay? That story connects people. That's what keeps things going because it roots people in the purpose, not just the process, not just we sell jeans. It roots them in the purpose of why. And then when you tell it well, it answers does this matter and why now? Okay. The second story is the story of where we're going. This is your vision story, the one that helps people see the future and their role in shaping it. It's what keeps people going, it keeps the momentum, especially when things get hard. And when told well, it answers the question, what are we building together? You want to ask yourself that because it could feel like a waste of time if you are like, I don't even know what I'm doing here anymore. Like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know what's the intention of all of this, right? And so answering the question of where we're going, what are we building together will help you connect to that. And then the third thing is the story of how we grow. This includes moments of failure. Like, you want to tell those failure stories. You want to tell those stories when you had to repair, those stories of when you were learning something different, because it makes leadership human and it teaches your team and the rest of the world, the external partners, that mistakes aren't final, that we could get through this, that was some feedback and it was like how we learned something, but we were resilient and we stayed on purpose. We stayed on purpose. We kept going. Okay. And when it's told well, it answers the question, how do we handle being human here? Can I be human? Is it okay to say or communicate the failures? I wish more organizations would actually tell more of how we grow stories, because we are so averse to failure that people just feel like they can't share that failure. And so I would wish, my hope for our society is we tell more, how do we grow? How do we learn? When do we fail and how do we make mistakes and where do we go from there? Okay. These three stories are your why, your where, and your how, and it becomes the narrative, the backbone of your system. Okay. And when you tell these consistently, people will start to believe it and they will start telling that story on your behalf. Now, that's the entire story of the system, the organization. But what about your story as a leader? Your story as a leader is just as important, because it's not enough to just tell the organization story. You also have to tell the story of your leadership. I remember this being done really well by some leaders that I've worked with, especially when they're new, or leaders that are coming into an organization and they're like transferring departments or whatnot. And when they can tell their own leadership philosophy and who they are, this connects them so much quicker to the team that they are leading. And so people need to know, what's your story as a leader? Because your team is also learning from you. They're looking at you and they're looking at how you role model the behaviors that you want to see. They're watching what you're going to prioritize. They're going to watch how you make decisions. They're watching how you respond to when things get hard. And all of these things are your leadership stories. Whether you tell it intentionally or not, people are going to see it and they're going to be like, oh, okay, this is who that person is about. Okay. So the three stories that you should tell about your own leadership. The first story is why you lead. Why did you become a leader? Why were you called to do this work? What do you believe leadership is for? That is such an important question. What do you believe leadership is for? Why leader anyway? Why is there a leader anyway? Okay. When you can share that, it gives your people something real to trust. and a purpose that goes deeper than your title or even your goals. It goes deeper. Y'all know my podcast, Leadership Beyond the Title. I believe that everybody is a leader, and when we find the stories that they can tell, whew, this is when it connects so much easier. Okay. The second story is a story of what you're learning, because leadership isn't about having all the answers, but it's always staying in the process of growth. My Strengths Finder's number one strength is learner. I am always learning. I am always wanting to learn. Y'all, when I first started college, I went to San Francisco City College. And I remember taking a class, and the teacher told me every Black student should have their own library at home. Have your own library with your own books. That's important. And so I started like reading. I was always, ever since I was a little girl, I've always loved reading, right? I think the book was Little Women, something like that. It was like the first book that I read. I remember my great aunt gave it to me. And I've always been a reader, but then that moment shifted something for me where I was like, ooh, I need to have a library. And so I've always been deeply invested in learning. And I always said to myself, I want my kids to be able to access, books from home and always access them. And right now in the world that we're living, if you don't have a book, if you don't have the things that you need, you might lose access to those things, right? But I digress. But you as a leader have to show that you are still figuring it out, that you are still learning, that you're going to make mistakes, because then it reminds them that imperfection is not failure. It is something that you are going through. It's human, right? It makes you human. It doesn't make you this title person on the org chart. It makes you human, right? We connect with humans. People stay with their leaders when they know they're human. Okay. And the third thing is, how do you handle failure? This is a story you tell about any of those moments where you had faced something that was big. It is something that kind of shook you. It's something that even maybe have questioned whether or not you should stay being a leader. These are the stories that you want to tell. Okay. They want to know, right? Because through you, they can learn how to go through failure and mistakes as well. When I read, like, there's a phrase like fail forward. What does that mean? Like, I've had people say, what does that mean, fail forward? If I had never went through anything, any type of failure, I wouldn't be able to explain that. But we want people who can explain what it means and what it looks like to be resilient and fail forward, meaning keep going and try again. Okay. Especially as a mom, like, I always have to tell my kids, you could do it. Like, keep going. Keep going. We're going to do it again. Right? You ain't going to let nobody outwork you. You ain't going to let nobody, run up on you. You got to be, I am him. Like I said, I'm him, right? That's the failing forward. We're going to keep trying. Okay? These are the type of stories that make your leadership human, and it makes it worth following you because you show something different. Nobody cares about the checklist on your resume. Nobody cares about and I have this on my LinkedIn, like all my accolades and things like that, because that's the platform to do that. I have all my degrees and the letters after my name. But people want to know, who is Tashina? Who is she? What is she about? Right? So these are the type of things that we want to be sharing with different people, because they're important. They invite people to come closer to us. They take off the armor. They take off the wall that we build. They stop us from being defensive, and we just become more connected as humans. Okay. So before we close, I want to give you a moment to reflect. Okay. I always have a reflection at the end. I want you to think about your team and your leadership and any of the systems that you're part of: family systems, church systems, religious systems, school systems, work systems, team systems. feedback system, decision-making system, whatever system you're a part of, and ask yourself, what stories are being told there about who we are, how we lead, and what we value? And then, are these stories helping people connect or are they keeping people apart? Okay. Do they remind people why this work matters or have they lost their meaning along the way? Have we gotten so disconnected that it doesn't even mean anything anymore? And then bring it closer to yourself. What story is your leadership telling you right now? Is it a story of clarity? Is it a story of trust? Is it a story of growth? Or is it a story of survival? Is it a story of being small, silent? This week, I want you to find one story you can tell. And when you find this story, DM me, okay? DM me. Tell me your story. Let's talk about your story. I want to hear your story. And I will give you tips on how you can share that story more in the context of whatever system you want to tell it. Okay. Maybe you want to talk about your why you're a leader. Maybe you want to talk about why you work in a specific industry, why you chose a certain lifestyle, why you do some of the things that you do, make decisions that you make. Tell your why. Maybe it's a lesson you learned the hard way, or maybe it's a story about what your team overcame together. Because you'll start to find that the stories you repeat shape what stays alive in the system. It shapes how the system is going to go. And then when we tell better stories, we're going to build better systems, period. Okay. So here's what I want you to remember. Storytelling isn't a soft skill. It's a system skill. And the stories you tell, repeat, and live are what teach people how they should be in the system. It teaches them how they can relate to the system and whether or not they belong. They show them what matters. They show them that they matter. They show what's possible and what's safe to do in your organization. Every story you tell will build alignment. Every silence you create, every not being transparent will keep you in confusion. And so, as you think about your leadership this week, I want you to answer those questions for yourself. Answer those questions about who you are, what your leadership says about yourself, and then figure out what people need to hear right now. There is so much going on in this world right now. So don't say that you don't have a story. You have a story. You have a purpose-driven story. Figure out that story that you need to tell, whether it's a leadership story or a collective organizational story. Okay. And then if you want more support, please DM me. I will gladly help you. We can talk about how we can work together if we would decide to work together. I have an email list. Join my email list. And also, I am looking for some folks for my podcast to interview this month. Okay. It's going to be quick. I want to get these interviews. So it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and it's also Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I am looking. It's also Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but I'm specifically looking for mental health and domestic violence. If you or you know somebody who have had personal experience with this, or somebody who is a coach, a therapist, or somebody who helps people with these things, please DM me. I would love to have you on my podcast for an interview. Because I want to share these stories a lot more. These stories mean a lot to me. And so I think it's something that it's the stories that mean so much that can help somebody in the future. So I will see y'all tomorrow. I will be back at 6:00 p.m. as well. So I'm hoping that I will be able to see y'all tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm just trying to look at what is the topic tomorrow. So tomorrow we are going to be talking about recognition. Okay, we're going to talk about recognition. We're going to talk about rewards, recognition, how to reward and recognize the people, and what gets in the way of doing that. All right. All right. Talk to y'all soon. Have a good night. Bye.